Ethan and I were famously known as the joke couple in high society. He once chased after his white moonlight in a desperate attempt to stop her from leaving, only to get hit by a train, leaving him wheelchair-bound. Meanwhile, I had secretly loved my childhood best friend for 10 years, but I never summoned the courage to confess. After we got married, our days were filled with bitterness. I mocked him, "You can't even stand, and you're trying to play the hero in some love story?" He sneered back, "At least I'm not like someone who doesn't even dare to confess." The next time I opened my eyes, I had somehow traveled back to high school. This time, I decided to gather my courage and confess to my childhood best friend. But that very night, a perfectly healthy teenage Ethan cornered me against the wall, his eyes red with anger. "If you really want to be with him, then just forget I exist, alright?" 01 I was scrolling through TikTok when I stumbled upon a video of a handsome high school boy publicly confessing to his childhood sweetheart. I hugged my tablet, squealing as I furiously hit the like button. Oh my god, childhood sweethearts are the best. When I turn 19, I'm definitely getting myself a love story like this. Ethan, sitting in his wheelchair, closed the file he was reading and rubbed his temples in irritation. "Yaya, could you keep it down?" Then, as if something had clicked in his mind, he let out a dry chuckle and said, "You couldn't even confess back then. What makes you think you could ever pull something like this off?" My hand froze mid-swipe, and a wave of bitterness washed over me. I had always been in love with my childhood best friend, Jodu, but I was too scared of rejection. What if I lost him as a friend, too? Then, 5 years ago, Jodu left without a word, heading overseas to work for some big company. Around the same time, my family went bankrupt, and I ended up marrying Ethan, who had always been in love with someone else. And just like that, 10 years of unspoken love amounted to absolutely nothing. The more I thought about it, the sadder I became. I got up to head back to the bedroom for some sleep. But as I passed Ethan's wheelchair, frustration bubbled over. I couldn't resist giving the wheel a light kick. At least some people have the guts to chase after their love. Now you can't even stand. Ethan's face turned an angry shade of red. In the 3 years we'd been married, the only time Ethan and I got along was in bed. Seeing him rendered speechless for once, I felt an odd sense of satisfaction. I went to bed that night feeling unexpectedly at ease. 02 I don't know how long I had been asleep when someone gently nudged my arm. I frowned, mumbling irritably, "Ethan, could you stop bothering me tonight?" Suddenly, laughter erupted around me. "Haha, Yaya fell asleep in class again. Guess that rumor on the school forum wasn't a lie. She's really head over heels for our genius, Ethan. Yeah, after crying her eyes out the other day, now she's just blurting out whatever comes to her mind." Class? School forum? What on earth were they talking about? I opened my eyes groggily, only to see a teenage Ethan in his school uniform. His fair face was tinged with a faint blush. It wasn't until I was sent to stand outside the classroom as punishment that the reality of my situation started to sink in. I think I've traveled back in time? Back to my high school days, 10 years ago. The sun was setting, painting the horizon a deep crimson, while the classroom buzzed with the sound of students reading aloud. Through the window, I glanced down at Ethan's desk and the legs that were still perfectly functional. And the worn but clean white sneakers he was wearing. Who would have thought that this quiet, penniless boy, who rarely spoke to anyone, would one day become the most ruthless and powerful man in the business world? 03 The first thing I decided to do after traveling back in time? Cozy up to Ethan, obviously. If I couldn't secure his favor, at least I could boost his opinion of me a little. At lunch, I walked straight to Ethan's table and sat down across from him. He looked up, his dark eyes meeting mine. "Do you need something?" Without a word, I pulled out my phone and opened the school forum, scrolling down to a particular post. I pushed the phone in front of him. School Queen Xia Yang confesses to genius Ethan. Yaya, heartbroken, cries her eyes out on the nearby lawn. The post had hundreds of comments piled up. That morning, flickers of my high school memories had started coming back to me. The first thing I remembered was this ridiculous post. Whoever came up with that title had way too much imagination. They should have been a novelist. Back then, the pressure of senior year had been overwhelming. After school, I would go to the back of the building to feed some stray cats. Over time, the cats went from being wary of me to rubbing against my legs affectionately. But one day, someone poisoned one of them. When I found it, I couldn't hold back my tears as I buried it. I had no idea that someone was confessing their love nearby at the same time. The girl confessing was my nemesis, Xia Yang, Ethan's first love. After marrying Ethan, I found out through his personal assistant that he had been in a car accident while chasing after Xia Yang when she was leaving the country to get married. Even while unconscious, he had been murmuring her name. Yang Yang. But I knew Xia Yang better than anyone. She had a sweet, innocent face, but she loved nothing more than watching poor boys fight over her. Once, in front of a group of friends, she had even said, "Watching these broke guys fall for me, one by one, gives me a sense of accomplishment I can't explain." After explaining the forum incident, my throat was dry. I grabbed the bottle of water on the table and took a sip. Ethan remained expressionless, giving no indication of whether he believed me or not. Finally, after what felt like forever, he spoke in an indifferent tone. "Oh." Then he added, "You drank my water, dot." Oh. 04 Ethan was broke. And if there was one thing I had plenty of, it was money. I hired him for a high fee to tutor me after school. Every day, I made a point to avoid Xia Yang. This time, I didn't want to see Ethan break his leg again. Even though he didn't love me after we got married, and even though we bickered often, he never treated me unfairly. He knew full well that I married him only to save my father's company from bankruptcy, yet he still agreed without hesitation. When we got to the library, Ethan seemed a little unwell. His long lashes drooped lazily, and his slender fingers gently massaged his temples. I opened my book and casually asked, like a gossiping friend, "Do you like the girl who confessed to you the other day?" Ethan dropped his gaze, his emotions unreadable. "Why are you asking?" I shook my head and flipped open my pencil case. "No reason. I just wanted to tell you something. No matter how much you like her, you should always put your own safety first." It was meant to be a piece of advice for Ethan. His dark eyes remained calm, as if he couldn't quite grasp what I was trying to say. For a brief moment, an inexplicable sense of pettiness rose within me. Maybe, in my eyes, Xia Yang wasn't exactly a good person. But what if, in Ethan's heart, she was worth everything? The atmosphere grew a bit awkward, so I pointed to a physics problem in my book. "Let's stop the small talk. I don't understand this question. Can you explain it to me?" Ethan picked up his pen, glanced at the problem, and started writing formulas on a scrap piece of paper. He carefully explained each step of the process. Snow fell quietly outside the window, and his fingers, gripping the pen, were bright red from the cold. His long, elegant hands had several chilblains. Okay, I get it now," I said quickly, grabbing the pen from his hand and shoving a hand warmer into his lap. He froze for a moment. Then, as if snapping out of it, he only dared to place his hand on the outer layer of the warmer for heat. Was Ethan always this well-behaved as a teenager? The chatty Ethan I married years later must have been an entirely different person. After finishing one problem, I randomly pointed to another one in the book. I don't understand this physics question either. Ethan, can you take a look? He picked up the pen and, while explaining, casually asked, "Didn't you say you hated physics the most?" After finishing his sentence, he seemed to realize it wasn't appropriate and added, "I mean, I hear you complaining about it to your friends all the time." I lowered my eyes. I want to get into an international university to find a friend. The pen in his hand suddenly froze, his knuckles turning white. Ethan frowned, and his expression turned cold. He put the pen down and said in a chilly tone, "I'm not doing any more of these." Me? Liar. I just saw him solve this problem in 3 minutes earlier. Plus, he's a genius. What kind of joke is this? Just like 10 years later, Ethan's mood could flip in an instant. I never understood him. The atmosphere became frosty, and my phone buzzed twice on the table. It was a message from Zhou Du. Yaya, I'm coming back the day after tomorrow. Will you pick me up? Zhou Du's return this time was to give a speech as an honored alumnus at his old school. Half the student body showed up for the event. I sat in the front row, watching him on stage, the focal point of everyone's attention. The girls around me whispered excitedly, "Zhou is so handsome. I wonder if he has a girlfriend." Forget it. I heard the number of girls he's rejected could stretch from here to Paris. He's so good-looking. Who wouldn't fall for him? I liked Zhou Du too, just like many teenage girls experiencing their first crush. Ever since I could remember, Zhou Du had always been the most dazzling person among my friends. Whether it was academics, looks, family background, or character, he excelled in every way. Almost every girl I knew had confessed to him at some point. The clearest memory I have is of one girl in our group confessing to Zhou Du in front of everyone. Zhou Du leaned back against the sofa, visibly annoyed, and hooked his arm around my neck. "You're all trying to get close to me with ulterior motives, huh? Looks like Yaya is the only one who genuinely treats me like a brother." I sipped my juice and hung my head guiltily. In truth, I was the one with the most ulterior motives. I just didn't have the courage to confess. Watching the girl's crestfallen expression, I felt even more sorrowful. A failed confession meant losing even the right to remain friends. The sound of applause jolted me back to the present. The speech had ended. Zhou Du walked toward me. "I talked so much I'm starving," he said. We went to the cafeteria together. As we ate, several people kept sneaking glances at our table. I hated those prying eyes. Even clearing our trays invited stares from people walking back and forth. As we left the cafeteria, I muttered under my breath, "So many people like you. Everywhere you go, it's like you're a gorilla in a zoo." Even though I spoke quietly, Zhou Du still caught it. He suddenly asked, "What about you, Yaya? Do you like me?" I looked up in disbelief and met Zhou Du's teasing eyes. The way he looked at me made my heart flutter with a dangerous thought. Could it be, he liked me too? I was so distracted that I forgot I was walking down the steps. My foot slipped, and I tumbled hard toward the ground. The staircase was long. If it weren't for Zhou Du's quick reflexes in catching me, I might have ended up in the ICU sipping porridge today. Luckily, I only scraped some skin off my ankle and twisted it slightly. The school nurse applied some ointment to my scraped ankle, and the sting brought tears to my eyes. After treating the wound, the nurse suggested we stay for observation for a while. Zhou Du sat in the chair next to the bed, casually flipping through my recent test papers. "Your grades have improved a lot recently. Have you decided on a college yet?" he asked. "I also heard you have a crush on someone?" Jodu had access to our school's forum. Feeling awkward, I shook my head and replied, "No, they're just making things up. As for college, I haven't really decided yet." Jodu closed my test papers and a faint smile played on his lips. "Then why don't you come to my university in the future? I can wait for you, Yaya." His words hit me like a ton of bricks, leaving me dizzy. Only after he stepped out to answer a phone call did I manage to collect myself a little. What did Jodu mean by that? If I thought I might have misheard before falling down the steps, this time there was no mistaking it, right? As my mind swirled in chaos, a nervous female voice echoed from the doorway of the nurse's office. "Dr. Smith, Ethan has a terrible headache. Could you please come take a look?" It was Xia Yang. Right after, Ethan's voice followed. "It's fine. I'll just rest for a period." Xia Yang sounded so worried, she seemed on the verge of tears. "How can that be okay?" There was some rustling from the other side, presumably the doctor examining Ethan. While the doctor was getting some medication, Xia Yang's slightly shy voice drifted through the curtain. "Ethan, is it because you've fallen for Shenyang that you turned down my confession?" There was a brief silence. I clutched the bedsheet, pretending to be invisible. Finally, Ethan's hoarse voice came from the other side. "No." Xia Yang's lips curved into a delighted smile. "Then I feel much better." In that moment, a strange bitterness filled my mouth. I couldn't even pinpoint its source. The next morning, my wound got infected, and I developed a fever. It was Jodu who helped me request a sick leave. I stood at the top of the stairwell, head feeling heavy, waiting for him to take me home. The bell had just rung, and Ethan emerged from the classroom at the other end of the hallway, holding a math competition registration form in his hand. I lowered my gaze, staring absent-mindedly at the white bandage wrapped around my ankle. Suddenly, a tall shadow loomed over me. Ethan's clear, crisp voice came from above. "Final exams are coming up soon. Do you need me to come to your house after school to tutor you?" I looked up, my voice raspy beyond recognition. "No, thank you." Just then, Jodu came out of the principal's office, with my leave slip in hand. He helped me walk forward, heading in the opposite direction of the person behind us. I thought to myself, if I had the chance to do it all over again, we probably wouldn't cross paths anymore. Hopefully, Ethan took to heart what I told him before. The new semester began, and the teacher rearranged our seats. The order was based on our final exam results. Ethan was the first to choose. He walked into the classroom and headed straight to his usual spot, middle row, right side by the window. When it was my turn, I chose the third row, far right, also by the window. Looking outside, I could see rows of cherry blossom trees in the courtyard. By late March, they would surely be in full bloom. Since then, I had barely spoken to Ethan voluntarily. The most I heard about him was during the awards ceremony, where it was announced that he won another prize in the math competition. The school's guaranteed admission spot was undoubtedly his. Yet, after receiving the competition prize money, he still chose to take the college entrance exams, giving up the admission spot to another student. I figured it was because he wanted to attend the same university as Xia Yang. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. The day the college entrance exams ended was the first time I truly felt like I had a fresh start. The bell rang, and the winds of freedom swept over me as I stepped out of the exam hall. I saw some girls running to their boyfriends, their faces alight with happiness. It suddenly hit me, I had never even been in a relationship before marrying Ethan. "Yaya, over here," Jodu stood not far away, shouting my name alongside my family. In that moment, a memory resurfaced. 2 days before the exams, during our break, my deskmate had been dabbling in fortune-telling. She said, "Yaya, this month is lucky for love. Your chances of a successful confession are 80". Was the universe trying to remind me to make up for missed opportunities in the future? If so, I decided to take a bold leap, no matter the outcome. The result? I ended up spending several carefree days with my deskmate, Mia, after the exams, and completely forgot about the confession. It was Jodu who reached out to me first. "Want to hang out tonight?" "I can't. I've got a high school reunion tonight." "Then text me when it's over, and I'll come pick you up." "Okay." The night was buzzing with restless energy. I had made a special effort that evening, putting on makeup and slipping into a black princess-style dress I'd bought just the day before while shopping with my friend, Lily. It was a style I had never dared to try before. By the time I arrived at the private room, the party was already in full swing. I found a quiet corner to sit in, trying to blend into the background. Lily spotted me from across the room and, grinning mischievously, made her way over to me, bumping my shoulder playfully. "Oh my God, I knew this dress would look amazing on you. You're always in your school uniform, looking all prim and proper, but who knew you had such a killer figure?" She teased, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of a few classmates nearby. "Forget about the guy you're planning to confess to. I'm starting to fall for you myself," she added with a wink. "By the way, is he one of our classmates?" "Keep your voice down," I hissed, quickly covering her mouth with my hand and making a shoot gesture. As I nervously scanned the room, my eyes accidentally locked with Ethan's, who was sitting in a dimly lit corner not far away. Ethan? He never attended these kinds of class parties. My mind wandered back to the last argument we had before our divorce. His mocking words echoed in my ears, "You can't even manage a proper confession. What makes you think you can handle a relationship?" No one knew about my feelings for Jodu, not even Jodu himself. So how did Ethan figure it out? Before I could dwell on it further, Lily tugged at my sleeve, her curiosity unrelenting. "Is he in another class?" I took a small sip of the sangria sitting on the table in front of me, using the glass as a shield. "No, he's not from our school." As the party wore on, I downed 3 glasses of sangria, not enough to get completely drunk, but just enough to muster some courage. Around midnight, someone suggested heading to another venue for dinner. I glanced at the time. It was getting late. After saying goodbye to the host, I slipped out of the private room. I was debating whether to text Jodu when a hand suddenly grabbed me and pulled me into the stairwell. It was Ethan. The moment I recognized him, my initial panic subsided. He wasn't a stranger, and he wasn't dangerous. But the smell of alcohol on him was strong, and his expression was unsettling. "Ethan, are you upset about something?" I asked cautiously. Who could have ticked him off? He took a step closer, a cold smirk playing on his lips. "Are you asking the 19-year-old Ethan or the 27-year-old Ethan?" His words hit me like a hammer. Could it be, had Ethan also traveled back in time, just like I had? Under the dim light in the stairwell, I took a closer look at him. He was wearing a simple t-shirt, but the redness in his eyes and the simmering anger in his gaze were anything but youthful. He looked more like the commanding and self-assured man I had known in our later years. Gripping my purse tightly, I asked, "When did you come back?" "Just now," he replied curtly. He had barely returned and already overheard that I was planning to confess to someone else. A fire of frustration roiled inside him, with no outlet for release. The 19-year-old Ethan was furious. The 27-year-old Ethan was even more so. I pursed my lips. "Why are you angry?" "I haven't done anything wrong." We used to be married, I continued, my voice trembling. But we're not anymore. Maybe it's time for us to go our separate ways. Before I could finish, his cold lips pressed against mine, cutting me off. It wasn't a kiss. It was more like a bite. The metallic taste of blood spread between us, and I winced, trying to pull away, but the cold wall behind me gave no escape. I pushed against his chest, but he wouldn't budge. I didn't know how long it lasted before he finally let go. My lips throbbed with pain, and tears welled up in my eyes. "Ethan," I choked out, my voice trembling. "What gives you the right to treat me like this?" His grip on my arm tightened, his voice icy. "Do you really think you can be with him? Have you forgotten that I'm still here?" I didn't answer. My tears fell silently, one after another. He stared at me, his tone low but demanding. "Xinyang, do you hate me?" Did I hate him? At that moment, I kind of did. Fueled by alcohol and frustration, my mind was a blur. I couldn't understand why Ethan, who had someone else he supposedly loved, wouldn't just let me go. Before I could answer, his lips found mine again, carrying the bitter tang of alcohol. In that cramped, stifling stairwell, the air grew heavy with an intoxicating mix of tension and suppressed emotion. Amid the haze of it all, I heard him murmur, "Even if you hate me, I can't stop." That night ended with me slapping Ethan across the face. I left the stairwell, muttering to Zhou Du that my family had sent someone to pick me up. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Ethan had bitten my lip on purpose, ruining my entire plan to confess. The next morning, when I turned on my phone, I was bombarded with a flood of messages, all from Ethan. "You may think whatever you like, but as far as I'm concerned, we're still married. Forget about being with Zhou Du, it's not happening." He had even quoted marriage laws at me, as if that would make a difference. Marriage law, Article 1041, marriage and family are protected by the state. The system of monogamy and equality between men and women is upheld. Marriage law, Article 1042, bigamy is prohibited, as is cohabitation with someone other than your spouse. Domestic violence, abuse, and neglect among family members are also forbidden. "Xinyang, did you read that?" It wasn't the legal jargon that caught my attention, though. It was the last 3 messages, sent early that morning. "Are you awake? Does it still hurt? Come downstairs. I bought some ointment." So, after dropping me off last night, had he never left? I pulled open the curtains and, as expected, saw that familiar figure sitting on the bench beneath my apartment. I headed downstairs, grabbing a cup of freshly pressed orange juice on my way out. "Drink this and get back home to rest," I told myself, trying to justify my actions. Honestly, if I weren't worried he might actually collapse outside my building, I wouldn't have been so kind. He took the juice from my hand. I glanced at him out of the corner of my eye, noticing the cut at the corner of his mouth. It looked worse than my own injury. This guy was like a dog, so determined to bite me that he ended up biting himself in the process. I sighed and tried to reason with him. "Ethan, 10 years from now, we're both going to have someone else in our hearts. We'll move on. Why are we still making the same mistakes now?" Ethan interrupted coldly, "Stop overthinking. I told you you can only be with me." I was so angry, I wanted to stomp my feet. "Why are you so domineering? You're head over heels for Xia Yang, yet you won't let me pursue my own happiness?" Ethan's brows furrowed. "I don't like Xia Yang." "I was there that day in the school nurse's office," I retorted. "I heard everything you two said. You told her yourself that you didn't like me. So, what gives you the right to meddle in my life?" Ethan froze. When had he ever said that he didn't like Shenyang? And then it hit him, there had been a misunderstanding. Shenyang. His voice softened a bit. When I said no, I didn't mean it like that. I wasn't rejecting her because I like you. Even if you didn't exist, I still would have turned her down. He paused, his tone tinged with regret. I had a terrible headache that day and didn't feel like explaining myself. If I'd known you were there, I would have made myself clearer. His roundabout explanation made my head spin. Yeah, right, I scoffed, rolling my eyes as I got up to leave. All I wanted now was to go back upstairs and take a long nap. Shenyang. Ethan's voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned around. My legs healed, he said, his voice barely audible, trembling ever so slightly. I can stand now. The faint sound of wind brushed past my ears, carrying his words with it. When we were sending Zhou Du off to another country, both of our families were there to see him off. As he passed through the security checkpoint, he turned back and gave me a smile. On the drive back, I couldn't stop thinking. It felt like déjà vu, like Zhou Du had said something similar to me in my previous life. But back then, those words were directed at the real 18-year-old Shenyang. At that age, I couldn't understand what he meant. Or maybe I just didn't dare to. That night, even if I had been emboldened by alcohol, I don't think I would have confessed my feelings to him. Even though I've returned to my high school years, my mind and soul no longer belong to an 18 or 19-year-old girl. The 18-year-old Shenyang would blush and feel her heart race every time she saw Zhou Du's face, longing to be with him. But the 26-year-old Shenyang has learned to think twice about everything. For instance, Zhou Du's dreams lie overseas, where he's determined to make a name for himself. I, on the other hand, don't want to stray too far from home. My ambitions are modest. He enjoys thrill-seeking hobbies like rock climbing and racing. I prefer staying home, tending to my plants. His gentle demeanor is only skin-deep, beneath it lies a ruthlessness that few ever see. And I'm the exact opposite of him. The moment we reunited at the airport, I probably should have realized it. Zhou Du and I aren't meant to be together. Maybe, without even knowing it, I've already started falling for someone else. As I walked out of the airport, a beggar rushing past accidentally bumped into my shoulder. He was in a hurry, but he still turned his head to apologize. Sorry about that. I pulled my lips into a small smile. It's fine. There was something oddly familiar about his face, as though I'd seen him somewhere before. But no matter how hard I racked my brain, I couldn't figure out where. I watched his silhouette grow smaller and smaller, eventually disappearing into the sea of people. That night, I had a dream. A dream about the time I was kidnapped. In the dream, I was back in my college years. It was my junior year, a time when the police described the incident as incredibly dangerous, yet I had slept through most of it. I'd been walking down the street when two strangers suddenly grabbed me. My memory of the event was hazy. All I could recall was being drugged and tied up in the backseat of their car. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, completely unharmed. The police had been standing by my bedside, explaining to my parents just how perilous the situation had been. The two men who kidnapped me were fugitives who had been on the run for 5 or 6 years. Recently, the police had begun tracking them again, so they panicked and decided to kidnap someone to use as a hostage. That unlucky person ended up being me. The police said that if their escape plan had failed, the criminals wouldn't have hesitated to kill me. Fortunately, their car got into a crash. One of them died on the spot, and the other was seriously injured. The police arrested them right then and there. The crash had been so precise that the impact on the back seat, where I'd been tied up, was minimal. As a result, I emerged completely unscathed. Just as I was feeling relieved in the dream, the scene shifted. I was back in the kidnapper's car, unconscious and tied up in the back seat. The man in the passenger seat glanced nervously at the rearview mirror. "Boss, there's a car following us," he said. "It's not just the cops, there's a sports car tailing us too." The driver didn't even flinch, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. A sinister grin spread across his face, making him look like a demon. "Ignore it," he said. "Once we get past this stretch of road, we'll lose them for good." As the intersection ahead grew closer, the sports car suddenly accelerated. Before anyone could react, it slammed into the kidnapper's car with incredible force. The deafening roar of the crash, the blaring of police sirens, the panicked shouts, all of it flooded my mind at once. Countless police officers surrounded the scene. Amidst the swirling dust, I caught sight of the person in the driver's seat of the sports car. It was Ethan. Blood trickled down his forehead in streams, and he had already fallen into unconsciousness. I rushed forward in a panic, wanting to save him. But from beginning to end, I felt like a bystander utterly immobile. The scene shifted again, this time to a hospital. I saw Ethan's personal assistant, Mr. Chen. The operating light flicked off. A doctor walked out, shaking his head at Mr. Chen. He said, "Mr. Ethan's leg couldn't be saved in the end." At 1 a.m., I woke up startled. I wanted so badly to convince myself it was just a dream. But the vividness of the dream was overwhelming, so real, that even in hindsight, my blood ran cold. I picked up my phone, my hands trembling as I typed. "Ethan, I want to see you." He replied instantly, "Put on some clothes. Be downstairs in 20 minutes. No, send me your location. I want to come to you." The typing bubble appeared for a long while on his end, as if he were hesitating. Finally, he sent a location. When I arrived, I saw Ethan standing beneath a street lamp at the entrance of a small alley. Tall and striking, he stood out even in the dim light. As soon as I stepped out of the car, he started walking toward me. My throat tightened, and I fought back tears. "In our past lives. How did your leg get injured? It wasn't because you were chasing a train, was it? You were saving me, weren't you?" Ethan didn't respond, his steps suddenly halting. He seemed startled that I knew. If I hadn't asked, "Were you planning to never explain in this lifetime?" This time, there was no hesitation. "Yes." I was furious, my eyes reddening with anger, but I didn't know how to speak my mind. We stood there in a tense silence for what felt like an eternity. Suddenly, Ethan frowned. He grabbed my arm and began leading me forward. My feet felt like they were weighed down with lead, every step heavy. Ethan pressed me to sit on a bench by the road. "Sit down for now." He pulled a small bottle of bug spray from the pocket of his shorts. Looking down, I noticed a few swollen mosquito bites on my calves. He knelt down and carefully applied the spray to my skin. My nose stung as I fought back a wave of emotion. "Why do you carry this around?" I asked. "When you said you were coming, I remembered how bad the mosquitoes are around here. So I stopped by a convenience store to buy it." As he applied the spray, he hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to come to me out of guilt. What I want is for you to truly like me." But now that I knew, all I felt was heartbreak. I mumbled softly, I'm not the kind of person who would be with someone out of guilt." Ethan was far too smart not to catch the subtext in my words. From my angle, I could see the back of his neck turning red. The silence lingered for so long that I began to feel nervous. Finally, Ethan set the bug spray down beside him. He sat down next to me. "The day after tomorrow, the results will be out. Which university do you want to attend?" "I haven't decided yet, but this time, I want to study medicine." Ethan thought about it seriously for a moment, before quickly settling on a plan. "Let's go to a university in Denver. It's close to home, and we'll both have access to the programs we need." When the results came out, I had scored more than 40 points higher than I had estimated. I was admitted to the best medical school in Denver. On the first day of freshman orientation, Ethan was the one who drove me to campus. His classes started 2 days later. To prevent any future incidents like me being kidnapped by criminals, Ethan bought an apartment near both of our universities. On days when we had a heavy class load, we'd stay in the dorms. On lighter days, we'd head back to the apartment. Even though I knew he had extraordinary business acumen, I was still shocked to learn that he had earned enough money over the summer to buy a property outright. On the way to campus, I sat in the passenger seat, sneaking glances at him every so often. Today, Ethan was wearing a black button-up shirt, the top button undone, revealing a hint of his collarbone. It made his jawline look even sharper. I licked my dry lips. My inner fangirl was in full force. But something felt off. "Ethan," I said. "Are you trying to show off today or something?" At a red light, Ethan turned to look at me. "I used to dress like this at home, didn't I?" I thought back. It was true. Ethan was a shirt enthusiast. Most of his wardrobe consisted of button-ups, predominantly black or white. Maybe I'd just gotten too used to seeing him in high school attire. But why hadn't I noticed before how attractive he was? When we arrived on campus, he carried one suitcase in one hand and held my hand with the other. Only after helping me settle in did he leave. As expected, by the afternoon, the campus forum was buzzing with posts about him. "Oh my God, he's so hot, I could die, huh? Are you serious, girl? I know him, he's my brother's sister-in-law's husband. Who gets it, y'all? I finally feel like an NPC in a college romance novel." I didn't even get to feel this way back in high school. When I saw the posts, I forwarded one to Ethan. "You sure know how to attract attention," I teased, attaching a sarcastic meme for good measure. 10 minutes later, Ethan forwarded the same post back to me. I clicked on the post. A new update had been added. "All right, everyone, disperse. This guy is from a neighboring school, and guess what? He's already taken." The screenshot attached was from Ethan's Twitter. It was a selfie of the two of us, cheek to cheek. Such a perfect match. The girl is gorgeous too. Come on, guys, someone this ridiculously handsome is bound to have a girlfriend. And if not a girlfriend, then a boyfriend. I knew it. I'm just like one of those nosy characters in romance novels. By the time this whole routine had played out, nearly everyone at our school and us knew that I, Xinyang, was dating Ethan from the neighboring school. I must admit, when it comes to scheming, I am no match for Ethan. During the long October holiday, Ethan dropped me off at the train station. When I got home, I texted him to let him know I was safe. "I've arrived." "Happy October break," he replied instantly. "Baby, happy holidays." I sat on the couch, thinking back carefully. In my previous life, for every single holiday, big or small except for Valentine's Day and our wedding anniversary, Ethan always used work as an excuse to send me home to spend time with my family. I used to think it was because he didn't really like me. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he must have been hiding something. After letting my parents know, I bought the earliest train ticket to Boston, where Ethan now lived. The two cities weren't too far apart, a 3-hour train ride. When I arrived at his apartment, I slipped off my shoes and climbed into his wardrobe, hiding there. Through the gap in the wardrobe door, I could see the living room. 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of keys turning in the lock. Ethan was back. He set down the bags he was carrying and opened his laptop. Then he headed to the kitchen to boil water. I took out my phone and sent him a text. "What are you doing, Ethan?" From my hiding spot, I saw him skillfully make instant noodles, before replying to me, "Having a big fancy dinner with friends, ... Liar. Ethan should seriously consider a career in fiction. "Then turn around and take a look," I texted him. He froze for a second, then actually turned around to glance behind him. Realizing he'd been tricked, he let out a soft, self-deprecating laugh. I slowly slid open the wardrobe door and tiptoed over to him. But before I could scare him, Ethan turned the tables and pinned me onto the couch. I asked, "How did you know I was here?" He glanced at the mirror across from the bedroom. "Why do you never spend holidays with me?" Ethan's smile faltered, and it looked forced. "I grew up moving from house to house, living with different relatives. I moved out on my own in middle school and never really celebrated holidays. I was worried you'd find it boring to spend them with me. People who have been through hardships love with such caution." I swallowed the lump of sorrow rising in my throat. "Then why don't you go out with friends for a meal?" I asked. "Instead, you stay home working, too busy even to cook for yourself." Ethan's voice was heavy with exhaustion as he said, "Shenyang, I can't wait to marry you." I pulled him onto my lap. "Stop talking. Close your eyes and rest for a bit." Before I could finish my sentence, my stomach let out 2 loud growls. I hadn't eaten lunch, and the 3-hour train ride had left me starving. "I'm hungry," I admitted. Ethan couldn't help but burst out laughing. My face turned red as I reached to cover his mouth in a panic. "You're not allowed to laugh." Ethan stood up, grabbed his coat, and said, "Let's go grocery shopping together, then?" And just like that, we were out the door. That evening, after dinner, Ethan was planning to get back to coding. But I deliberately kept him busy, kissing him for over 10 minutes. Then, feeling the heat radiating from his body, I mischievously pushed him away. "All right, you can go work now." Ethan groaned in defeat. "Anything I'm working on can wait." He adjusted his cuffs as he stood up. Suddenly, he paused, as if something had come to mind. His voice was hoarse as he scooped me up from the couch. "Baby. Go put on that little black dress." "Huh? What little black dress?" I was confused. Ethan let out a sheepish chuckle. "You look amazing in that dress." The word "amazing" was practically growled through gritted teeth. I twitched at the corner of my mouth. So he's never going to let that go, huh? That night, needless to say, Ethan never got back to coding.